Alright, my name is Jonas Williams Jr. It is 5 after midnight. This is my final report for tonight. Alright, so let me get a couple of things straight for all you people out here who are putting up comic book facts. Could you please be specific about the timeline and the comic books in the era in which you are putting up? Alright, so let me stand up for this because I'm a little bit pissed off about this and I need to be forefront and to the front. Alright. So somebody did a report about the X-Men and X-Force, and they left off Excalibur, and they left off X-Factor, and they were completely off base. Alright? First, let's all begin with 10 years before I was born, about the same time as Jet Li being born. Stan Lee and a couple of other fellas created this comic book called The X-Men in 1963. Now, since I wasn't born until 1973, anything from the 60s to the 70s until about 75, I have no fucking clue about. However, storylines and everything changes. So let's get down to the nitty gritty of the X-Men. This report was talking about the X-Men, and somewhere along the line, I know I haven't went through an alternative timeline or time warp and everything, and about 30% of the guy's shit was correct about Samuel Guthrie. But what he found out and said completely wrong was that the New Mutants was formed when Xavier's team went into space. No. The New Mutants were formed way before his team went into space because, in case this person who I have no idea who you are, and I'm not going to disrespect you by revealing your name because I can't remember it, but first off, the first 5 X-Men were Cyclops, Marvel Girl, aka Jean Grey, Beast, aka Henry McCoy, Iceman, aka Bobby Drake, and Angel, aka Warren Worthington III. So let's get that off right first. While they were the first 5 X-Men, the New Mutants were, they didn't have a comic, but they were in the X-Men comics. Havoc, the younger brother of Cyclops, aka Alex Summers, Polaris, aka Lauren Dane. Then you have Sunfire, I can't pronounce his name because it's completely Japanese. You had Thunderbird, not Warpath, Thunderbird, John Proudstar. You had Banshee, who was a cop, who was becoming an X-Man, like Warpath's brother Thunderbird. Then you had Colossus, Peter Rasputin. You had Storm, Aurora Monroe. And you had Logan, who was Wolverine. And let's see, you had Rogue, Dazzler, and Kitty Pryde. Kitty Pryde was the only one who was traveling between both comics, as in the New Mutants and the X-Men, because Kitty Pryde was 14. And she was Illyana's best friend. Illyana, who was technically a 4-year-old girl, or a 7-year-old girl, who was kidnapped by Basco, or whatever the hell his name is. He's a big purple demon with a black jacket, who was a vest. He kidnapped her, and she became the sole owner and possessor of the Soul Sword, and she is also Colossus' sister, and her code name was Magic. Magik. Magic. Anyway, on her team, by the way, there was Mirage, Danielle Moonstar, Cannonball, Sam Guthrie, Renee St. Clair, Wolfsbane, Doug, his code name I think was something that had something to do with writing and reading and stuff. And then there was Warlock. We'll get into that another time. So the guy made this report. He left off those important characters because those important characters would later be known to form other X-Men groups. And I left off Nightcrawler, Kurt Wagner, by the way, who came in as Thunderbird and then we're going out. Okay, so Thunderbird, John Proudstar. On his maiden voyage, he kicked the can. Banshee wasn't fast enough to save him from the plane that went down. I can't remember who was in the plane, as again, this is like in 1970 something, and I was just learning how to read. So to you and your X-Men files, I don't know what timeline you were mentioning, because in that timeline you're probably correct. But timelines have been changed, and the reason why I stopped reading the comics because of the 2008 clusterfuck that is Marvel. I love Marvel to death. Forgive me for the clusterfuck comment, but ever since 2008 and Scarlet Witch destroying the 616, I pretty much decided that I'm no longer going to invest into the comic book because of the way the X-Men were going. Alright? Now moving back to what my point was. Excalibur. Elizabeth Braddock, aka Psylocke, was a white lady who was the twin sister of Excalibur's leader, Brian Braddock, aka Captain Britain, who had Megan, and then Renee, and then Nightcrawler, and then Kitty Pryde, who was formed. They formed that team when the X-Men died at the hands of another X-Man known as Forge, who was dating Storm. Alright, so we got that clear? Alright, now let's go ahead with origins. Cable's mom is named Madeline Pryor. She is the clone of Jean Grey with a little bit of the Phoenix DNA. So for those who don't know that, now you do. Because Sinister created her to make the perfect weapon to kill Apocalypse, whose son would later become the second Apocalypse. Alright? So did you guys do know that Apocalypse 2 is actually a Summers? Right up until about 2008, where they changed all these timelines, because Nathan Grey came through, and Nathan Grey is the son of Jean Grey with an undetermined father from a different timeline or an alternate dimension, and we go into that. We'll never stop this video. So we're gonna make these things as abundantly important as possible. Alright, so in the middle to late 80s, they had a saga called Fall of the Mutants. And in this saga, X-Men from each team would pass away, with the exception of one team, because they only had 4 books at the time. So one team, and only one team, would not lose a member of the team. New Mutants lost Doug. The entire X-Men team was wiped the fuck out by Forge. And as far as X-Factor was concerned, supposedly they lost Angel. But Angel became Archangel of Apocalypse. Alright, so he didn't die, he just was captured and repurposed, so to speak. He went through some shit and turned into the Archangel, who launched an attack on X-Factor. Eventually he would come back to being who he was, and in that time Beast became an Avenger and went back to being an X-Force member. He got smart, he got dumb, he got smart again, and then he turned blue. Alright, and now he looks like a fucking cat. So you see why I stopped reading it. Alright, now, during the Fall of the Mutants, the entire X-Men died in Dallas. It was called Death in Dallas, and Madeline Pryor, Cable's mom, who had recently been attacked by the Marauders, who recently had kidnapped Nathan Grey, Charles Xavier, Dre Spring Summers, Cable from 616, was kidnapped by them and given the legacy virus by Sinister. While all that's going on, Forge had to use 7 X-Men to cast a spell to fix whatever his Native American enemy was inside his high-rise in Texas. And outside, Freedom Force, which consisted of Mystique, Crimson Commander, Silver Sabre or Saber or whatever the hell his name was, Avalanche, Quicksilver, and the Blob, and Mojo's lackey with the 6 arms, Spiral. The bitch got 6 arms. She only had 2 breasts, but she has 6 arms. So, during this clusterfuck of what's going on in there, they were fighting dinosaurs and cavemen and all kinds of other stuff, and Dazzler took a knife to the face with a mask on. Alright? So, they also had, the spell had to be used so they could use the Sears Parallax. I'm probably not saying it right. If you've been watching Spider-Man and the Sinister Six, and you know what the hell I'm talking about, that little square thing, Dazzler actually had it first. But she didn't get it back until after they came back through the warp when Roma, who was a friend of Captain Britain, also a guardian or a god or whatever she is, brought the X-Men back. And in this, the price that the X-Men paid for becoming legends is that no camera of any kind can ever read their biometrics. So their faces and stuff, whenever you see them on camera, it's just blurs. Because technically, they're all dead. Now, only 7 X-Men and Madeline Pryor died that day. The other X-Men, the members of Excalibur and X-Force, a.k.a. the New Mutants, did not die. But they all watched it on TV. And at this time, Xavier's ass was with the Shi'ar Empire, so therefore that guy was wrong, because he was with the love of his life, Lilandra. He left because he got hurt, and she was the only one that could save him, so the X-Men understood that, and surprisingly enough, a new leader of the X-Men took place, And you guys aren't going to believe it, but it was Magneto. It was Magneto. So Magneto started leading the X-Men, all right? And this is what led them to the death in Dallas. And Kitty Pryde and Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler was hurt. Kitty stayed behind because she was having some phase issues where she couldn't unphase, or she could phase, or something was wrong with Kitty and Nightcrawler. So since they were the two weakest links, they stayed in New York. New Mutants were having their own issues as they tracked Hodge to an island where he proceeded to put a shell through Doug Ramsey's side, blowing out the other side, killing him damn near instantly, and he took a bullet to save Renee, I think. I have to go find the comic, but it's called Fall of the Mutants. It's like 1986, 87, somewhere in there. It's about the same time that Jason Peter Todd was voted to die. So anyway, as Marvel was having their clusterfuck, DC was also having a clusterfuck. So if you're not up to speed, now you are. So then, while that was going on, apparently Colossus' little sister was losing control of Limbo, and everything in Limbo was going to hell because Marilyn Pryor had not been turned into the Goblin Queen yet. But Sinister had made a deal with Nastrif, or whatever the hell his name is. He's the red demon with the wings and stuff, to make sure that Ballisto, or whatever the hell the purple demon with the black jacket on, would go after Madeline when they got back. So his plan had revolved from all of that shit, but that was like a side curve that got thrown into his plan. And so the only way to get Madeline back on his side was to do that, because Madeline believed that she survived the 747 plane crash and that she was the sole survivor, and apparently everyone else in the Marvel Universe did too. So that was that in a nutshell. And so, knowing that, now you have, knowing that you have all these things. Knowing that you have all these elements into play. So you have the X-Men dying in Dallas. You have New Mutants being shot, and Magneto was leading them too. And then you have X-Factor, who's hunting down people like X-Men. They're hunting down all the mutants and secretly putting them in secret places. While all that time, you also have the Morlocks, who are living under the X-Men mansion and all those extra guest rooms that Xavier had built into the mountain. It goes all the way down to, like, I guess, damn near next to the core. And, you have the plane and all this other stuff. Well, while all that's going on, that was the place where the Morlocks could roam free with no one judging them, and Storm put them there after she beat Callisto. Alright, and that was before the fall of the mutants. That happened back in the 60s and stuff, so the Morlocks had free run, which also introduces you Leech and his brother and Amadeus Cho with Rusty, Skids, Richter, and Boom Boom, and they were the Exterminators. So those who don't know, yes, Amadeus Cho was a mutant who had technical skills, like Doug Ramsey, who is a mutant whose only mutant power was really to understand all languages. In real life, that would probably work. Same with Amadeus Cho. He wasn't just a genius like he is on Spider-Man. It was part of his mutant power. So I don't know when they changed all that, but the Exterminators split up. Rusty and Skids became a member of the MLF. Richter and Boomer became members of the New Mutants, and then Richter went on his own, and it came back to be a New Mutant, and then they had to fight Hodge again, who became the spider-like guy who was stripping mutants of all their powers. And that's a whole other line that we're not going to get into. And before they changed the timeline, Gedrin was trying to get Roberto to become a High Lord when he found out that he wasn't supposed to be the High Lord. The High Lord was going to be Samuel Guthrie, a.k.a. Cannonball. But then the timeline changed, and that screwed all that up, because Cable went back in time to get the New Mutants, because he knew that the High Lord was going to be Cannonball. And then, I guess, after the timeline got screwed in 2008, they just, totally deviated from that story. But Cannonball was supposed to be a High Lord. They did a whole annual on it, and it took you into the future to let you know what happened. But when 2008 came, all that shit wasn't canon anymore, so I don't really know why they did that, and I don't really care. This is kind of why I stopped reading my favorite comic of all time. So then you have X-Men, who spawned X Factor. New Mutants became X-Force. and they were still led by Cable because he came in because Magneto was on his way out. Magneto decided that he didn't want to be the leader of an outlaw band of heroes anymore, that he wanted to be his own thing, which he started forging Asteroid M. No, I think my computer's screwing up. He forged Asteroid M. So once he made Asteroid M and he started having his own problems. About this time, the X-Men started coming back into the real world. Colossus had a relationship with Callisto, and come to find out that he lost a foot and a half, so he was no longer 7'4". Now he was like 6 foot even or 6'2", and when he changed to Colossus, he was only 6'4", 6'5". When he used to be 7'4", he used to be bigger than the Hawk, and now he's like mad smaller than the Hawk. And they had some what ifs with him and the Blob and all that other stuff. If you're up to speed on all that, and then they had they somehow or another started changing everything up. Wild Child was a member of the MLF who would eventually, during the Age of Apocalypse, the first section when it came out in the late 90s, early 90s, Wild Child and Sabretooth were heroes on one side. Wolverine was a hero on the other side with him and Jean Grey, and he only had one arm and one claw through that arm, but he had his adamantium claws. And then you had Cyclops and Havoc, who were actually the sons of Sinister in that dimension, and you had Psylocke, and she was Asian still. And then when they flipped back around, everything came back to normal. Just like with Days of Future Past, if you read that comic saga, Wolverine and Storm were the only two to survive the X-Men thing. Jubilee had not been an X-Men yet when that was created, so Kitty Pryde was basically the star of that comic, and she was hunting for them or some bullshit, and then they went in some kind of ripple in time, and it was like really twisted and everything. But all the X-Men had graves all over the X-Men mansion, so it was really complex. So if that hasn't gotten you up to speed, eventually when the New Mutants was formed, Cannonball left the New Mutants. Well, X-Force, excuse me. When X-Force was formed, Cannonball was there for a little bit. He left and joined the X-Men. He was on the blue team or the gold team or the silver team. He was on one of those three teams. Because by then there was like 90-something X-Men and yay, so many X-Forces, so many X-Factors. Shatterstar was working on Cable to get him to go back to his world so they could finish off Mojo 2 as well as Mojo 1. And then that was going to happen, but I don't know if it happened because, like I said, when 2008 came, they totally screwed up the storyline. After the Onslaught issue, I was pretty much done with the X-Men because Onslaught wouldn't attack mutants, but he would attack superpowered heroes. When he ripped Bruce Banner out the Hawk, I knew that it was going to be a good story, so I'm still trying to find a trade. But no one else could make the Hawk suffer like that. But you know, the whole thing is that they started twisting up the story, and I made this video to point out some things that the guy had lacked off. So now let me make a second part to get to that because I totally got off track when I started going through X-Force, Excalibur, X-Factor, New Mutants, Generation X, and X-Terminators. Those were all the X-Men comic books in a nutshell. They even had a New Mutants where the New Mutants from the past, which they had everybody. They had Warlock, Doug, Karma, Magic, Wolfsbane, Cannonball, and Mirage, which is Danny Moonstar. They had all of them come from a different dimension to meet themselves and everything, and it was cool as hell. But I don't think it really lasted long, or it didn't sell well, or something was going on with it. But sorry, responding. Anyway, so as I finish this out, there was like, and then not to mention, they also had the classic X-Men books that were running really well because I had to get that instead of like I couldn't get the original print of the Phoenix and the Dark Phoenix saga, but I got the classics, and they're basically reprints, And then there was like reprints of when Nanny, that floating head thing, not the guy on Spider-Man, but the other one that looks like an egg. Um, they shot Storm dead. Kind of find out they didn't really shoot Storm dead. It wasn't really her, and then she was kidnapped, and she found Gambit, and Gambit helped her get back to wherever they were before they all had to go tangle with Hodge again. And once they tangled with Hodge again, the price of that was Warlock. So Warlock died, and when they got back home, they put Warlock's ashes on Doug Ramsey's grave, and so then Doug Locke was born, because the ashes apparently seeped through the casket or something, and he found the body, and Doug Locke was born. I forgot what else they called him, but anyway, that's that in a nutshell. And I'm going to make a second video to let you know other facts of X-Men that this fella that I'm speaking of left off. No disrespect intended, but if you're gonna make a X-Men video, you should probably hit the archives first. I'm James William Sr. Just Kung Fu Havoc #2.